people want to be, especially when you are involving other investors, in a project, like you want to be scrupulous with every single dollar, and you want to be right. And you're being so careful, but it's like, okay, well, let's talk about how all the price of lumber and everything else is just like going through the roof every single day. Like, so where are we losing out there? And where are we losing out on rents and developing relationships with our residents that are new, and because we have new units available to them? Like, it is a fine balance. And unfortunately, I think oftentimes, too often, people lean towards that. I'm like tripping over my headphones. People lean towards that whole concept of like, oh, we got a penny pinch. It's like,
this is the real estate investing experience. We get it. Real estate can be rough sometimes, and that's why we bring in the experts to talk about the experiences you won't hear anywhere else with your hosts, John Cohen and Chris Grinzik.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Investing Experience. I'm your host, Chris Grinzik, and with me, as always, is John Cohen. How's it going, bud?
We're doing good. As we just spoke, it is a beautiful day, and I get to be stuck inside recording podcasts all day and take advantage of the weather so beautifully. No,
you have months ahead of you of good weather.
I do, and I cannot wait for that to be here. But no, all good on our end. We're rocking and rolling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're just saying now's perfect. It's like high 70s, low 80s most of the time. I can't complain. And then in about 4 weeks, 5 weeks, all you're going to hear me complain about is the weather for the next several months. So not looking forward to that.
And I will be on the flip side. In about 4 or 5 weeks, we'll be having some great weather with no complaints. So exactly. You could complain, I won't.
So I'm enjoying it while I can, getting outside, trying to do things. So I don't know. Maybe I'll just start going to the beach more once it gets really hot, because that should be better. But let's jump into today's episode, because I don't care about us. I think we have a great guest on. I'm excited to talk to her, and I think it's going to be a really great chat. So screw the normal intro, but really excited to have her on and learn from her. So that being said, Julie, thank you so much for joining us.
I love the format of your podcast. I love it when it's informal and just like normal people. And by the way, you know what, like we said, like the weather is a great opportunity to grow as a human being. So we'll just chalk it up to personal development, right?
For sure, right? Gotta look on some sort of the bright side, right?
Absolutely. It's around every corner if you look for it.
Yeah.
100%. So kick us off. Tell everybody a little bit about you, your background, journey, what you do, all that great stuff.
All right. I'll try not to take like 5 hours to do that. So my name is Julie Holly, and I podcast as well. I am Ask Me How I Know, multifamily and mindset. So you'll hear a lot of mindset comes out of me, because I am I'm a sellout. Like everything like goes down. Like if your mind is, in the gutter, you're going to have a hard time in life. So I'm huge into that element of that. I am a passive active. Listen to me, a podcaster tripping over her words. This is hilarious.
Okay. You don't find it often.
I know it doesn't happen often. But anyhow, I'm a passive investor moving to the active side on the commercial real estate, but I have a lot of experience on the single family end of things, which is super fun. And I basically have had experience doing pretty much everything under the sun on the single family side, and I'm married to a residential broker as well, which is really fun. But what's interesting is that I've had 2 careers, and they're parallel, and they just weave in and out of each other, which is beautiful. And that is as an elementary school teacher in the public estate. And so it's interesting to see at this point, like 15, 13 years later, like to see how that comes together. So, it's interesting also to hear, I think today a really great conversation would be to speak to those professionals. I'm sure you guys come across this all the time, like these professionals that are like, oh, I'm just not qualified to I have to go and do like all these special things in order to be involved actively in real estate. And it's like, you have a really successful career over here. I'm pretty sure you're going to really crush it and rock it over in the real estate side. So, I mean, that's like the nutshell version. I am a detailed person, so I could go into details, but I don't want to like go onto any rabbit trails.
That's fine. So you did just cut out a little bit. You said you were an elementary school teacher, and what else?
Oh, so elementary school teacher, but I was also involved in real estate.
Gotcha.
And they just kept going in and out in the sense of, am I being 100% active in real estate, or is it like the side hustle type thing? So really, really interesting.
Yeah. So I guess that brings up a pretty interesting topic that I think a lot of people find trouble with is like, I know me, like I like to bounce around and like explore ideas and try different things. And, you know, when I was working with John and back up in New York, we would always explore different things, whether it was, you know, land, mobile home parks, you know, what else do we get in Airbnb arbitrage? I looked at like laundromats. How do you balance between like bouncing back and forth and also, you know, kind of staying in one lane?
That is such a really good question. Okay, so here's the analogy that I have for everyone. And I'll probably do a mindset episode on this. And that is that if anyone has been in a major city, I grew up in California. You could just think of like the 405 freeway has 7 lanes and they're all headed one direction and they're all back to back, right? And so, but every lane has a different speed that it's going. And so sometimes you're merging. And so you have to put a little, you know, like a little more acceleration into things just to merge on and join the club. But I think of every project that I'm doing, because I'm involved in a lot of projects, I think of them as different lanes. And sometimes like 100% full throttle, I'm in this fast lane on a particular project. Right now, I'm getting ready to launch a network group, which is super cool. We'll have to talk about that. So obviously that's like my fast lane. That's like charging ahead. And I have some other things like in different lanes, but they're always moving, right? And so you're like keeping your finger on the pulse of what needs my attention? What is my priority? But at the same time, how am I nudging the ball forward? How am I keeping my foot on the accelerator in these other lanes? It doesn't always mean like moving these mountains and everything, you know? And so it's like really having an understanding of what are my tasks? How have I broken down the tasks so I can see the plan and I can take action along the way? But I know that right now I'm focused over here. I think that's like number one. If you want to tackle a lot of different things, you have to be really organized and understand. For me, that's like the visual, and that's how I break things down. And then at some point, you have to put the blinders on. And I have a hard time, Chris, I'm totally like you. I am like, oh my gosh, you know, I mean, I'm involved in some alternative assets. I'm like, oh, whoa, what's that? What's that? And because there's so many great opportunities, you know, to invest. And it's important right now to be investing strategically to hedge against inflation and to find, you know, where's my cash flow going to come and how's this, right? How is everything complementing each other? So there is a balancing act between being wide-eyed and aware of what are my options. And then once you embrace an option, sometimes it's okay, blinders are on, I'm focusing until I get this off the ground and it's successful. Or at least it doesn't need my full fast lane, undivided attention.
Yeah, it's you know, what I use as a former broker, you know, it's possibility and probability, right? If you're going to put all your eggs in the basket of possibility, well, you know, you might hit, but you want to put your efforts towards probability, right? Your higher percentage of success. And doesn't mean you can't try different things, because we all like to do it. It's just when push comes to shove and you're getting into the nitty gritty, it's like, okay, blinders on. This has the, you know, highest likelihood of success right now. Let's execute. And then you can use your time accordingly. So I love that analogy and the simpler form, you know, possible, probable. You could, you know, shot in the dark, go for it, but understand that if it doesn't work, you know, how much time do you want to spend doing that? So, but I love the way you broke it down. And I think that's just a really good segue of how to, you know, if you wanted to get a little bit more now, or, you know, 2 things, right? Instead of focusing on 7, but I love it.
I think that so many people in this space have at least 7 things going on. But think about this. You have like your slow lane where it's like, you know, just cruising along. And it's like, you know, maybe you're just nurturing it, just, you know, attention like once a month. But I agree. Sometimes you got to buckle down and be on that. Like, hey, this is a 2-lane road. We're going.
No, 100%.
How do you know?
I love that.
So how do you know that something is something you can put in like that slow lane that you don't have to have as high of a touch point or stay on it all the time? Like, do you have a tangible example you can give, or like a way to identify something? Because I think sometimes people will fall into that trap of like, oh, I can kind of set it and forget it, but it's not really something that you can do that for.
This is so true. So a perfect example is that I'm launching an impact investing network with a fellow friend and investor, Camilla Jeffs. And that has actually been, so we're recording this, it's going to launch on Earth Day, no less, which is just in just a couple of days from this recording. All that to say, it's something that's been on my heart. So like, let's just break this down for a long time, right? Like it's a vision I've had for a long time. And I let that vision, I let that idea, I just let those things swirl. So it's like some people find entertainment scrolling on Facebook or whatever. I'm like, ooh, what idea do I want to, kind of take further, right? So you have your idea phase, your development phase, and then people start coming into my life that made sense to carry the conversation next. So like when I'm breaking a task down, it's the more I talk about it. So it goes from like idea to discussion to, okay, now I have some players involved. And then at that point, like I usually end up having the breakdown of, okay, we're really going to do this. We believe in this. We believe it's going to be, that it is probable that this is going to be, executed well and serve a lot of people well. Now let's figure out our timeline. So look at the calendar and break down the tasks, create some anchor points like, okay, this is when we're going to launch the newsletter. This is when we're launching the podcast. This is the retreat. This is when the fund rolls out. So at least you have like those like mile markers, and they don't have to be stacked on top of each other. But that's really how I've broken that down, with my partner on that. And it's allowed us to, every week we meet, and I've done this with a lot of other projects. So this is just one example, but it's like just those weekly meetings. Do I meet with everybody for every single thing? No, other things are off my plate. This is my focus priority. And I know because it's probable and we figured it out and we're rolling it forward. But having the macro vision, and then breaking it down into those mile markers, and then breaking it down each week into, if we just do these, like 5 simple steps this week each, we're going to be there.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I think that's something that has hit home for me a lot in like the past, 6-12 months, as I've been like trying to figure out what I want to accomplish over the next 10 years. And it's like, can't know where you're going without some sort of path. But you can't really follow the path if you don't know what your next step is, right? You can't just jump to the end. It's impossible. So breaking down those those long-term goals into more measurable steps along the way is something that's really easy. And I love using, software like we use Monday.com, and we've been using it for a while, and something like that to really take those projects, break them down into steps, take those steps, break them down into tasks, and just be able to check them off every day. Because some days you feel like you're getting nothing done, but it's like, okay, I know that this tiny little thing chunks off X amount of % of this thing I'm trying to do over the next 3 months. And sometimes you get stuck in your own head where, days and weeks, you don't really feel like you're doing a heck of a lot. But then as you kind of push through and do all that stuff, then you kind of see the outcome come to fruition.
That's really funny. I made a comment in every action. So I have like my daily planner journal thing. Every action plus step forward unlocks new opportunities. Mm-hmm. Like, because there are those points. I'm feeling that pain right now at this moment. Like, sure, my impact investing network, that's getting ready to launch. I have a website rebranding and everything that I'm working on that's been delayed. And so accepting that sometimes in order to have the best outcome, you have to say, okay, I need to just accept, receive, and make some of these adjustments to my timeline, because I know what I want at the end and I know it's achievable. But in order to do that, I've got to like push back the timeline, and that's got to be okay. It's such a bummer when that happens, when you have your expectation. And I think, tell me what you guys, I'd love to know what your thoughts are. I think that's why a lot of people don't set goals. And they don't, like, they'll leave them maybe as pie in the sky goals. Oh yeah, in 10 years, I want blah, blah, blah. They don't want to break it down, perhaps lots of reasons, but one reason might be that, well, what if I don't reach it? Mm-hmm. What if I have all these delays or the obstacles? Thoughts? Love it.
So that I love. So as a baseball player and a former baseball player, not anymore. Now I can barely even stand up.
Come on.
But you're a Hall of Famer if you succeed 3 out of 10 times. But I'm not saying that that's the way everyone should look at things, because it's not. If you fail 7 out of 10 times, you're probably not going to be successful at what you did. But the way, we had a mindset guy come in when I was in college, and our coach brought somebody in and he said, 3 out of 10 is your batting average base hits. But look at those other 7 at bats and see what you did, right? Did you get a runner from second to third? Did you get, did you bunt a guy over? Did you get a productive out where maybe you grounded out, but you got a runner over? Look at those other at bats, and then you can take your batting average over a 10 at bat, 20 at bat, 30 at bat, end of season, you want to hit 300. But if you hit 275, but you were successful 65, 70% of the time at bat, that's not a failure. So I think that makes a ton of sense, where it's easy to say, I want $1 billion, I want to have $1 billion business, and I want $1 million house here, and a house on the beach, and a house at a ski resort. And it's easy to say that stuff. And then when you fail in 10 years, you're like, oh, that was not realistic. But if you can take that down and break it down into weekly, quarterly, monthly, daily, even, when I go to bed at night, I put all my tasks that I have to do, and I say, okay, this one's the most important. Get that done tomorrow. You could fuck around for the entire day. If you get this one done, quickly, you've advanced the ball down the field. You're closer to the end goal because you got the hardest thing done. And I think that's how you have to break things down. It's not just success or failure on a number. It's, okay, what did I do in my failures? Did my failures push me forward a little bit? Did I accomplish something? Might not have got it done, but I got most of it done. And I think when you look at it that way, and you take your goals and you break them down, you can fail so frequently but be so successful because you're getting things done even though you're not finishing tasks quickly.
I love that. I'd say, like, Einstein, when I was a classroom teacher, I always taught the little second graders, Einstein's quote, you never fail until you quit, until you stop trying. Like, that's the point of failure. But we receive the feedback constantly. So, like, every listener right now, just seriously go rate this 5 stars if you agree with this, because I'm certain that you agree with this. And the agreement is that as I've entered into a task, it took on a life of its own. And there were all the unknowns that I could not calculate for. Like with my website, I didn't know that I would want to do like a whole new photo shoot for my website, and that would serve it well. And the time, okay, well, you know what? We just dropped that in there, and that just added 3 weeks that was unaccounted for, but it's going to create the ultimate outcome that I want. So it's like being prepared to, I am like so tired of the word pivot. So let's get a different word beside pivot. But like, you have to be ready to pivot with every, uncertain thing that comes up and hits you in the face.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's been studies done that, and I think they did this with students a lot, where they're like, how long is it going to take you to complete an assignment? And then when they asked them to break it down, their estimates were the assignment was if nothing went wrong, like if they didn't hit any obstacles or didn't run into any problems, like nobody accounted for time if like the printer ran out of ink, or if their computer restarted, or if they spilled coffee on, like, even just little things that happen in day to day, not even talking about bigger things where you're talking about deciding to change topic midway through, or pivot to something else, or needing to wait for a research book. All those things can be applied to literally everything. So it's just funny, and I found it even myself as I've been going through, some of these capital projects and doing different things. I always know that it's like, okay, it's going to take, double the time that I think. But even when I put something on paper, it still ends up taking a lot longer, just as all these little problems come up, or as things change, or you have to make changes, or you decide to do something else because you've learned some new information. Those things happen all the time. So it's really interesting, just another example to kind of hear that from you.
I love that.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say that it's funny, right? Because when you put a construction budget together, you throw a contingency in there, right? And I know, Julie mentioned it, when she schedules these, she always has a little bit of time before and after, because you never know. But do you do that on everything? And the answer is no, right? There are times where we jump on podcasts and we say, we're going to record for this long. Be like, I have a hard stop. Okay, I get it. I understand that. But, little things like that come up, and if you leave yourself a little wiggle room on everything, you're going to kill your day. So you have to pick and choose. But it's funny because you're right. Everybody wants things done quickly and yesterday when going into it, it's going to take longer. So it's just, when you did your construction budget, you had a contingency, but most people don't look at the time contingency. It's a dollar contingency. And that's just one component of it. So it's funny you bring that up as an example, because I know you had a contingency budget in there, but it was not money. It was money, not time. And people think of, well, I got it done for cheaper, but it took you an extra 2 months. Well, you could have paid more and got it done quicker, right? It's a delicate balance. At the end of the day, it's a finished product as quick and on budget as possible. But those are the two levers. I mean, we're running into on our properties where we've been telling our manager, guys, spend the money, right? Just spend it quickly. Yes. Don't sit on it. It doesn't save me any money. We have 20 vacant units. Why are you renovating 4? Renovate 20, get it spent, done, and lease it. And sometimes it goes against just common sense, right? Why do you want to spend it if we don't need to? Well, we're going to spend it now. It's a delicate balance, and it's an interesting balance if you look at it.
Mm-hmm. It is. And I think that's what holds so many people back right there, John, is, people want to be, especially when you are involving other investors, in a project, you want to be scrupulous with every single dollar, and you want to be right. And you're being so careful, but it's okay, well, let's talk about how all the price of lumber and everything else is just going through the roof every single day. So where are we losing out there? And where are we losing out on rents and developing relationships with our residents that are new, and because we have new units available to them? It is a fine balance. And unfortunately, I think oftentimes, too often, people lean towards that. I'm tripping over my headphones. People lean towards that whole concept of we got a penny pinch. It's you're shooting yourself in the foot. Get going. Just get her done.
That, the conversation we're having, we're getting better than expected on properties, market blending, Chris, that deal extremely well. We are getting so much more than we expected, and we're spending less. But when we're bidding jobs out, they're getting 3, 4, and they're trying to save every dollar. I'm like, guys, it's bottom, we're getting an extra $50. That's that's $600 over the course of the year. I don't care if you spend an extra, 87 cents, right? It's at some point, it's the risk reward or the money you're saving doesn't outweigh the benefit of turning the tenant base, getting a better tenant in there. That over the long period of the deal, lower occupancy, better tenant, better collections, whole 9 yards, you're going to make up for it. Even if you're 20, 30% over budget, people don't realize that vacancy and turn are going to kill. You can get the unit renovated for as cheap as possible. If that person leaves in 6 months because it's not the right tenant or it wasn't done right, that's going to kill you compared to spending a little bit more or quicker and getting it leased to the right person. Or you can take your time leasing it to the right person. And that's something that, I can guarantee there's no one teaching people that, right? Everyone's teaching you tight budget. But, those little things and those little changes are going to make major differences to, cash flow, NOI, value, whole 9 yards.
That's really powerful. That's been our experience, just with renovating and working in the single family space. And that is what kind of resident do I want to have in this asset? I want someone that's going to treat this like their home. I want them to want to stay. I want this. So what does this need to, what do my finishes actually need to be like? So I'm going to spend a little bit more, put in and offer this, or I'm going to create it and create this environment that is going to create the right resident. It's going to attract the right person. I want longevity. And guess what? I had residents that stayed and they treated it like their home. Never a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting battle, because one thing that I've been trying to focus on as we've been doing those renovations is trying to reverse engineer what it would be like to walk in for the first time. And when you're doing renovations, you obviously, especially with older properties, you got to pick and choose what you do, right? Because you can't spend tens of thousands of dollars redoing everything unless it's in an incredible location and that's your business plan. But 90% of the time, that's not it. And it's really trying to think about what's the important stuff. And it's been really funny for me going through the process, because I've never been this in depth before, right? I've never basically GC'd the renovations myself. And now renting, when I walk into my apartment, I'm noticing little things that I never noticed before. I was really unsure about having, because we have an AC closet door, and the hinges are painted. I was like, that kind of doesn't look great. And then I walked into my unit the other day and I recognized the front door on my own apartment, which is only 10 years old, has the hinges painted. I was like, oh, okay. I didn't even notice it. Forget it. That's not a big deal anymore. So, I'm going to save myself what, $20, but it's those little things of, as you start recognizing, like, being really aware as you walk into stuff that, you rent or you own, and understand like what's the stuff that's really important to you and stands out. It helps you pick and choose what you actually want to spend money on. Like we were talking about, the bathrooms have the old 4-inch by 4-inch tile that goes all around the surround and across the walls. And it's like old and dated, and debating back and forth whether to rip it down or not. And then I saw a couple other listings in a nicer part of town that had it, and it looked nice and they were getting really high rent. So I was like, okay, then clearly it doesn't matter because people aren't caring that much about it. So it's kind of those little things that I found really interesting of, as you're renovating, picking and choosing what you're doing, trying to really understand what the tenant or resident is looking for.
That's really powerful. And that's the power of shopping around and knowing what's available to, your potential residents, and knowing your base. What caused you? I'm curious, if you hadn't taken that perspective before of walking through as, a potential resident, like what is it that was maybe the light switch moment for you?
Well, I think it was just being way more involved in the process. So in the past, when I was with Toro, it was, leaving it up to the property managers of like, hey, here's our rough budget, and here's roughly what we want to do. But those little things like that, it was kind of decided by them. Does it need new hinges or not? Does it need, can you just resurface the tile or not? So we really relied on their expertise because, they're the professionals, they're the ones that are doing it. But now that I've, moved to Florida, I'm self-managing and handling all that stuff myself. It's kind of a learning process. And it's just really being conscious of, when I was looking for apartments for myself, what did I look for? Talking to other property managers as we've been shopping around, asking the question like, hey, what are the things that prospective tenants comment on? Like, what do they think is the most important things? And it's, mostly obvious, right? Kitchens and bathrooms. That's what everybody really cares about. But down in Florida, ceiling fans are a big one. Another thing that surprisingly people really seem to love is backsplashes. Apparently, a lot of the managers I've spoken to have said for some reason backsplashes make a huge difference when a tenant walks in. So like that, I kind of already had that opinion, but hearing it affirmed from some other people was nice. Hopefully, I don't have a confirmation bias, but it is what it is. But just picking their brain, kind of like trying to be a little bit more aware of like, as I'm looking at my own stuff, as I was looking for an apartment, like what are the things that stood out to me and I cared about, and then understanding the difference between like, once you get in there, how did they prepare the apartment? What are the things that stuck out to me right away as like a negative? And then what are things that I just didn't even notice that don't really matter to somebody? Because I'm going to notice way more than, a normal renter anyway. So it's like, okay, if I really don't notice it, then it's really not that big of a deal. And I think
it's so fascinating. Yeah. What do you guys think? Like, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, there's such a detachment that can take place if you're not, hands-on like you are, or if you've been so far removed from being a resident, and a renter instead of owner. So like, how could we help other active investors who are trying to tackle, major renos and everything? How do you think, what do you think would help them get back in touch with that resident experience?
I think, I think one, you can always just, go tour properties as a prospective tenant and like actually like try to remove the filter of like, hey, I'm looking at this to compare my property to theirs, and be like, hey, look at this as if I was actually going to rent this place, and like what sticks out. And it's not the easiest thing to do because you're still there shopping it for, probably a similar property. But if you try to just think of it of like, hey, I'm actually going to live in this place, like think about the placement of furniture, right? Because that was a big one. On my first deal I bought here, the floor plans there's technically 2 floor plans, but they're the same thing. They're 2-bed, 1-baths, roughly 865 square feet, but the layout's slightly different. And I didn't realize for the longest time that the layout of one was more challenging than the layout of others until I started paying attention to how the tenants were laying out their furniture in the unit. And it's little things like that I think when we walk in as investors, we're more concerned about, what are the cabinets? What are the flooring? What are the light fixtures? What are they getting for rent? Are there washer dryer connections? And we don't think about, when I walk in, where am I going to put my keys? When I walk in, where am I going to put my bag and my shoes? And, what do I see when I walk in, and do I feel safe? And is the landing area, the walk-in area bright enough and clean enough, or is it dirty? I think we tend to put on a different filter. And if you can kind of try to readjust back to that and think about like, okay, if I walked in, how would I feel coming back to this every day? I think that would be a really good way to go about it.
Yeah, I like to, remove yourself from the investor or the owner mindset and the tenant mindset, right? Talk to everybody, right? Talk to the tenants at the property, talk to the tenants at other properties. If you talk to, a management company, talk to how they treat their residents. There is nothing more powerful than asking the word why, or, you could ask it 3 or 4 times in a row. People don't even probably realize you're doing it, but if why do you want to live here? Oh, it's a great location. Okay, what else, right? Ask the questions to the people that are going through the daily experience, because, it happens all the time where you walk in and it's, I want to put a beveled mirror because I don't like that. Okay, that's fine, right? That's personal touch. Maybe it adds value, maybe it doesn't. But speak to the people living there that may or may not have any care about the mirror. They just want to worry that it's really light and it's bright and it's safe. But I think that speaking to the people that are living it 24/7 can take you out of the mindset of I got to do granite and stainless steel. And it's, oh, wait, all I have to do here is make it clean, safe, affordable, clean. That's what these people look. Oh, it's really close to their work. They all work within, 15 minutes or whatever it is. If you understand the demographics and the work status and the emotional and the physical of the people living there, you probably have a better idea whether just going in with a $5,000, $10,000 door plan, that might not do anything. We've learned that by going in and making minor changes, getting huge rent increases by not doing what we wanted to do, by addressing totally different, issues. So I think understanding the tenants, and now it's a delicate balance, right? Because tenants are going to complain about everything. But if you understand that, you're probably going to be more successful than if you just, I got to put in stainless steel because that's what everybody's doing. That you might have to do that, but speak to the people there and speak to the people at the comps, right? This property is renting for more money. Why? Is it because of the appliances? Is it because of the relationship with management? One way or the
other. Those are huge elements right there. And I like that you came about that from also really that still is coming from the, I will call that a compassionate, attached investor point of view, where it's like, you are, the investor, as an investor, we're always like sifting through all the data, combing through it, to looking at the comps, looking at the area. We're always like sorting through and putting the puzzle together to see if all the pieces align and everything. But you're coming at that also like from the human position. And like, that's when I think the magic happens and the success happens, is like, you have to remember that these are not just like little bots that are paying you money. Like, these are people with lives, and they have cats and dogs and children and, who knows what else.
Yeah. I think we take tenants for granted a lot of times. We talk about, these successful companies of Amazon and Apple and Tesla and all these, Netflix, and they just provide this incredible, customer and user experience. And we just take tenants for granted because people need housing, and we don't really care about necessarily the experience per se. Because like you said, we just say, all right, well, they have a 12-month contract, so they're going to pay, right? And it's kind of like, they've got to live somewhere, right? So it's like, pick and choose and try to find one that doesn't suck too much. And it costs money to go from one place to another. So it's like, I think a lot of management companies, investors, owners just kind of take that for granted. And what we're talking about is really trying to create a better, customer experience, basically. So I think it's, kind of interesting that you brought that up.
That is like, bam, heart. Like, I know that you're not supposed to put your heart into everything, but I have a big heart, so there's room for everything. And that's part of what the Impact Investing Network is all about, that we're rolling out. And And that is creating an impact. Like if we create these experiences, what one Impact Investor Network, it's people, purpose, profits, planet, right? Like I finally found other people who are actually able to create these amazing investment experiences, because I was told it's not possible. And so I was like, okay, but it was on my heart. I'm like, no, this has to work. I know that we can have like a great investment with really awesome profits that is very intentional and purposeful. And, like law of attraction, whatever it is, I don't know, but it's all come together. And now there's this collection of investors that are not compromising the profit component, and they're not compromising the purpose component. And it's like, we can have both. They can live in harmony together, and like to create those resident experiences. And this is not just like, oh, we're creating some affordable housing experience. It's what resident experience are you creating that's going to create a ripple effect in that community? You affect one person's life and you have an asset that's 70 to 200 units or more, and you can have this positive impact in their life. Like that's just going to ripple out to the world. And it's amazing. I can go on.
But, so I do want to come back to one thing that I think is interesting and kind of selfish on my end. When you get involved in a lot of projects, you mentioned you have a partner on one, and I would imagine you have partners on other. How do you decide like when to have partners, when not to have partners? How to, like, do you ever feel like, oh, this is something I would really, love to just do on my own? Or do you really find like a ton of, value and experience in bringing in partners? Like, how do you manage all that? And do you just have to have partners to be able to do a lot of different things?
That's such a relevant question, and I appreciate it. So I was very much a self-made, like I can do everything on my own, because that's just how I was, kind of the stock I come from, if you will, like be resilient, make things happen, and go at your own. Because guess what? When we do it on our own, speaking to so many people right now, again, just go rate this 5 stars, because I know you agree with this, or you're either agreeing with it right now, or you're going to be like, yeah, I used to think that. And that is, if I don't do it, then it's not going to be done correctly. And I'm going to have to go back and I'm going to have to redo it myself. So I better just do the job all on my own, because I can't really trust anybody. Well, just shove your ego to the side already, please. Like somebody else can actually like totally outdo you. And if you give them the opportunity and if you align with the right people. So honestly, I had to learn to, and this is like, this hits home. I don't know if this is going to hit home with you guys, but sure. This hits home to me. And that is that I had to deal with my own ego. And I think that that's really what this comes down to is, can I do this on my own? Yeah, I can do all these things on my own. It'll just take a lot longer. We'll go off on that in a second. But if I just want all the glory for myself and all the credit for myself and like, look what I did, it's really coming down to like, how big do I want my ego to be? And like, I'm like, that's not going to serve anybody well. So I came to a point finally in life where I realized if I really believe in something and I believe it's going to serve, the world well in some capacity, I have an obligation and responsibility to bring that to life as swiftly as possible. And for me to be able to do that on my own, that's not going to happen in a swift way. I cannot tackle all these things on my own. However, when I partner up with other people who have a shared mission and vision, and it's interesting because I'm involved in like 3 different big things, and they're all, similar. They're similarly aligned, but they're very different, like in their own places, right? And so they have different missions and visions, and it's like different partners for different, projects and everything, because it complements. And I'm a huge advocate for partner up. I can't even imagine where I'd be right now if I had partnered up sooner and gotten over, but I had to grow past my ego. And I'm just it is what it is. Like, I'm grateful that it didn't take me another 10 years.
So how did you go from not partnering to partnering? Because I think that's something people struggle with. It's something I debate with a lot back and forth on, the future of my business and other things I want to do. And I'm not opposed to it, but, finding the right person, finding the right people, really delegating those responsibilities. Like, how did you make that transition, or what are some things that really helped you?
I would say that it really comes down to trust and acceptance. So trusting that other people have amazing skills and talents and resources that I do not have, that you do not have. And if you can trust that they can bring something to the table, if you have that shared vision that you have agreed on, right? You guys know, like, hey, okay, we agree that this is what we want to achieve and accomplish, and we have that. But now I have the power of different vantage points, but it's trusting that they're going to stick. Like, we might be looking at, like if we're looking at, let's just say a sphere, like a model Earth type thing, we're going to be looking at it from two different vantage points, but we're both bringing power to our perspective, and it's going to enhance it. But it comes down to a significant level of trust. And it's beyond trust in their ethics and their things like that. I think so often we get hung up on that. Really, we do care about that because nobody wants to do the wrong thing, right? I'm just going to say nobody wants to do the wrong thing. Nobody wants to, right? But we also have to trust that they're going to pull through on their own. And we have to accept, and I think this is really the linchpin right here, right? We have to accept that whatever our initial vision is, it is going to morph and shift, grow, and change as we get into it further. It's like going full circle to our point earlier about you get into a project and you didn't expect and anticipate the curveball that was thrown to you, and now you're thrown off your game. Like, you have this really great vision, but you're going to receive new information as you go through the process, and accept that it's going to shift and change a little bit. So I think that the power is in trusting in your partners and in accepting that the final outcome is going to be far better than your initial vision.
Love that. Is there anything that you think you do really well as you're talking about partnerships or finding partners that has been helpful in making them last or having a better comfort level going into it?
I think it's complete honesty. I think people probably pick up on that even just from this conversation, is like, if you think that you're going to just hold something, if you really want to be partnered with someone, you have to be your authentic self, show up as your best self. But everyone that I partner with, they know, because I will tell them very upfront, like, I'm a recovering perfectionist and I am a recovering control freak. I am a teacher. I am a woman. I am a wife. I am a mom. I'm just throwing stereotypes out there, right? So like, hey, I'm allowed to because it's me and I'm a woman. So you guys can't say that, but I can. But I'm like, by nature of all those different hats and roles I wear, that I have to keep that, control freak and perfectionist in check. So I think it's like knowing not just what you're bringing to the table. I bring energy, I bring vision, I bring ideas and perspective that really propel things significantly. But my partners also know, I realize I have a lot of energy, and sometimes that can sabotage, and I have to keep it in check. You have permission to let me know. And like, just to be like, if everybody on a partnership is wide-eyed about strengths and weaknesses so that nobody's little feelers get hurt, and everyone can just kind of stay in the right lanes, it's magical. And people want to stick together because you're real. Yeah. And you're making progress.
I think one thing you're saying that people might not pick up on is having self-awareness of yourself going into it, and like where you kind of fit into that puzzle and what your role is. Sounds like it's a big part of it as well.
I think
that you just said it in like 5 words. I love it.
I was about to say that, everything that Julie mentioned is 100% accurate. And Chris, 100%. I think at the end of the day, anytime you're going into any type of relationship, understanding the value you're bringing, if you're satisfying someone's need and they can satisfy yours, that's how it works, right? What are you missing and how can you integrate it better? it'll work out better. So you guys nailed it. And I think that's the end all be all of a partnership, right? If your feelings getting hurt when you're having a conversation with someone, it's not going to work, right? Everyone's got to be a big boy or a big girl, and you got to understand that.
Yep.
Wake the fuck up, deal with it. Shit's going to happen that you may or may not like, but can you get over it? Can you turn the page and still be productive, because you're adding a level of value that they would have never been able to tap into with themselves. And if you can do that, partner. If not, maybe it's a one-off JV type deal, but just understanding the dynamics of all the people involved and how they all go together, that's the nature of the beast.
It's huge. I love your nutshell. And I'll add, there are opportunities that have come my way for partnerships that I have not fantastic, awesome people. I haven't gone down that path. I said, thanks, but no thanks. And that is because I could just sense in myself that either I wasn't going to be able to receive feedback because maybe I have them on a pedestal and I really respect them so much, and I'm going to feel I'm not going to show up as my best self. I might show up as subordinate. I might show up as, my feelers are going to get hurt. So like, you have to be aware of like who you're partnering with and say like, okay, how can I show up every time I hop on a call, and every time we're working on this project, can I show up in the best way possible or not?
Mm-hmm. I think too, one thing that people probably stay away from partnerships for is they hear all these horror stories of things going wrong and partnerships going bad. I would imagine at this point you've had partnerships that have either ended or faded out or didn't go exactly according to plan. Can you just talk to a little bit about the actuality of that, or how you've steered that ship, or how you've ended relationships without them blowing up, or if they have, is there things that you've learned through that process?
Yeah, it's interesting. So in the real estate space, I haven't experienced that, but in other parts of my life, I have experienced it because I've organized and run a lot of different things, and being able to receive the feedback is it's painful. If something's not going the right way, it's painful, but you have to be able to receive the feedback and put yourself aside. That's really challenging for, I think, most everybody. It happens. So like, why dwell on it? Like, you have to make some mistakes. So for instance, I used to run different clubs, just a variety of different clubs. And I learned from that, like, very quickly. Okay, well, we have a cutoff date. We have a revisit point. Like, I always encourage people, anytime I'm on a team where we're, depending on what we're organizing, not so much even in real estate investing, it's like, well, this is our potential sale in 5 years, like there's an end date, right? Like, always have an end. Sounds terrible, but have an end date, have what I call a healthy exit point. And so, for instance, I hired somebody to take over editing my podcast. And I said, I just want a 3-month commitment right now. And at 3 months, we're both going to revisit this and we're going to see how this is working. And I usually put in a lot of waypoints along the way in everything in life, because then it gives everyone permission to have a gracious exit if it's not working out well. And so even on a partnership, if you're, like, partner up with people are really good. I mean, like, look around you, look at the people in your life. You probably know a lot more really good people than like people that are really horrible. Like, we all know some people and we steer clear of them, but most people are really great people and they want to do the right thing and they want to be successful. Like, go partner up with them, but put some waypoints in there. If you're like just forming a real estate team, then say, hey, you know what? We're just going to work together and tackle our first deal. Or, you know what? Hey, let's just cheer each other on and support each other in a complementary way, and maybe make it more of an accountability type situation with, just the people you're considering partnering with. And hey, we'll revisit this in 3 months. You get a chance to get to know each other well. You get to see how they operate. You get to see how ambitious they are. And if after 3 months, I do have a thing with 3, you guys. So after 3 months, then, hey, this is working out really well. Maybe we continue it for another 3 months, or maybe we say, hey, you know what? I just love this. Why don't we just I've got this deal. Let's just do this together. You don't know where it's going to lead, but here's the thing. If you never take action, you'll never get there. Like if you're always so busy being a skeptic, well, hey, you're staying in the slow lane on that freeway. So enjoy that, because the rest of us, we're going to pass you by and you're going to start feeling really crummy about yourself.
I taking the action, right? Like you're a human. If you get a bad feeling, don't do it. If you have a good feeling, do it. If you fuck it up, it's okay. You can get over it, right? And like especially if you have an end date, or hey, this deal's not going to work, or or you can go to the other school of thought, right? There's so many personality tests. You can have people take it and say, hey, we're the same people. I don't think it's going to work, but at the end of the day, just do something, right? Do it, right?
Yes.
If you want to be skeptical and negative and all about that, you're dead before you started. But make bad decisions. Just learn from your bad decisions, right? And just don't keep making the same mistake over and over again. But dive in. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, right? Start it as my company, your company together, as opposed to let's go, operating agreements, LLCs. Like, don't do that. Just dive.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Exactly. Dive in, make it happen, and see what happens. And if you get along, you get along. If not, listen, there's no harm in trying.
I like the expression fail forward. Like if you're going to fail, at least like be going forward as you're tumbling and falling, because you're going to get back up. You just make it into a somersault and it's cool. It's fine. Like, exactly. And if you think that you're not going to get through your investment journey or any part of your life without stumbling, tripping, falling, doing a face plant, you're going to have a hard knock life and you're not going to like actually get where you want. So enjoy the slow lane. Like you can't get where you want in life if you're not making some mistakes. That's just feedback, letting you know, I'm not going to do that again.
So as we're wrapping up, I do want to connect two things, because you talked about earlier about pivoting, but you also talked about, not, like it's not a failure until you give up. But like pivoting is almost, I don't want to say a way of like giving up, but you're changing from what you were doing. So I guess like, how do you look at something that maybe isn't working how you expected or is changing and decide like, hey, I'm going to give this up altogether. I'm going to pivot, or I'm going to put my nose to the grindstone and keep trying for something. Like as you kind of hit that point where you're like, something's not right. It's not working 100%, or it's not what I thought. How do you make that decision and, not feel like you did give up, too early before it happened, or, what, this isn't working, so let's pivot into something else. Or you're like, hey, I've just got to, stick this out and get through this period.
If you feel like you have to there are times where we have to stick it out, and we know in our gut that like, trust your instincts, when you need to stick it out because it's going in the right direction. And the difference. If you trained yourself to listen to your instincts, then like, I could stick this out, but this is never going to be what it needs to be. It's interesting because there's a thread over on LinkedIn on this exact thing. And I placed a comment there, and I'll reiterate it. And that is that, why have we conditioned ourselves that we are failing when we set out to do something and we get the feedback that it's not going to turn out the way we wanted, or it's going to cost more, or it's going to be right there? All these things, as we mentioned earlier, like as you venture, towards your vision, you're going to have a lot of new information come to you. And that information should have influence on your future decisions. That should okay, I'm now informed that this is not going to be what I think it should be. So why should I stay with it? It's no longer what I wanted. I now have the feedback. So I'm no longer chasing or pursuing what I wanted, because I know now it's going to be far different. So I don't think that that's a failure. I think it's accepting that, oh, I saw it, just like I do tons of mountain biking and outdoor wilderness stuff. And it's like, the false summits happen all the time. You're like pushing, either hiking or biking, and you're pushing through and you think like, oh, I'm almost at the top. And you're like, oh man, that wasn't the top. Right. Yeah. And so like being able to receive that what your perspective was is going to change along the way. And you need to be in tune with that so that you're always aligned. So personally, I don't think it's a failure. I think it's when you're in tune with things and maybe you do 180. I'm kind of hooked right now on this idea of 1 degree. And if you are like, let's say we're out in the marina and we're on a boat and we just, veer off 1 degree over 10 years, 1 degree off is going to take us very far away from what we're pursuing. And so just like making sure that everything is tying back to what your main goals are, and like, okay, well, this isn't working out the way I thought it was going to work out, and I have no control. I don't have control or influence, or this is something outside of my wheelhouse. Well, I need to redirect. That's all it is.
100%. Yeah. There's something like if you fly from, I think, out of LA and you point at New York and you change by 5 degrees, you'll like end up in DC or something like that. So I think that's, you know, the same thing, but really powerful. That triggered something in my head while you were saying that. So
I love it.
Yeah, 100%. But I think that's an awesome place to wrap up. Julie, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insights, opinions, thoughts, experiences, all that great stuff. So I'm sure people are going to want to check you out. So where can they find you, follow you, connect with you, learn more about you, all that great stuff?
Awesome. Well, when this airs, my new website will be up, unless I have to pivot, right? So just head to julieholly.com. It has the podcast, Ask Me How I Know, Multifamily and Mindset. So there's a page for that. There's a page for investing. I run book clubs and all sorts of fun things just to help lift people up and inspire their thinking to a new level, and also to network. So lots of fun things if you go to julieholly.com.
All right, perfect, guys. Definitely go check her out. Find her probably on any platform you're on as well. So definitely go hit her up, check out the podcast, do all that great stuff. But thank you, everybody, so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. If you are not already subscribed, it would mean the world to John and I if you would do so. And if you are, please send it to somebody else that would get a tremendous amount of value from this episode. Julie, once again, thank you so much for coming on. This is amazing.
Thanks, guys.